The Prime Minister will use a speech in front of China's Premier Li Qiang today to declare that while ties are being rebuilt, Australia will not be silent on disputes with Beijing. It's the first visit to Australia by a Chinese Premier in 7 years, and security has been stepped up ahead of high-level talks today.
The Prime Minister has signalled he'll raise difficult issues like military encounters between the two countries and Australians detained in China. Let's bring in the National Executive Director now at the Australian Institute of International Affairs, Dr. Bryce Wakefield, for his assessment from Canberra. Bryce, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Michael.
What do you make of the visit so far?
Well, look, it's obviously designed to be a bit of a charm offensive by Li Qiang. There are certain priorities that the Chinese have to get the relationship back on track, not least they're looking for support for their bid for ascension to the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. But what's interesting, I think, is the difference in tone between the Chinese approach and the Australian approach. Albanese has obviously said that, look, we're not going to ignore the differences that you've already outlined in your intro. And I think it represents a stance on the part of Australia which is quite different from the past. Australia is coming to realise, I think, what a lot of countries around the region and Southeast Asia have known for millennia, I think, and that is that if you're going to exist in an environment with China, you have to learn to stand up to it and also get along with it at the same time.
And how important, in your view, is Australia, your words, standing up to China?
Look, I think it's important that Albanese is and his counterparts, or his Wong and Farrell, are firm about those issues that are important to Australia, namely human rights, as you said, the detention of Australian citizens, and also military provocation that we see in places like the South China Sea. There are opportunities in the relationship, of course. Australia has had in the past, a fairly robust trade relationship with China, and there are opportunities there in terms of the trade of rare earth minerals. But we must be clear here, just because there are friendly relations with China, just because there's panda diplomacy, we shouldn't back down on the things that are important to us.
And also you mentioned the economic relationship. Do you see the further reduction of the last remaining trade sanctions China has on Australian goods as a result of what so far has been a pretty successful visit?
Yeah, of course. Now, we shouldn't be too celebratory about this. These trade restrictions shouldn't have been put in place on Australia in the first place. I mean, they're contrary to WTO rules, and of course China is part of the WTO. And we also must remember that China is doing this for its own purposes as well. It wants ascension to the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, and in order to get that, it has to get basically consensus of all the parties. And if it's engaged in the sort of behaviour we've seen in recent years, it's unlikely that the parties are going to agree to that, although it's a pretty high bar anyway. A lot of the parties, like Japan and probably still Australia, would be queasy with the notion of a China that's willing to use trade as a political tool to have them join this high-level trade agreement.
I found the Foreign Minister Penny Wong's words on Insiders yesterday interesting, Bryce Wakefield. She talked about, regardless of what happens as a real result of this visit, Australia and China being, in her words, in permanent competition in the region. And it's pretty true, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that was in part a kind of dig at the opposition's climate policy and their ability to entice Pacific Island nations to Australia's side, if you like. But yeah, we are. I mean, this is a period of strategic competition, and that strategic competition is going nowhere. We are faced for the next few decades, I think, at least, of a period where we're going to have to be quite subtle about our diplomacy. As I said, we're going to have to be able to stand up to China and get along with China at the same time. And that's going to necessitate on our part a great deal of diplomatic flexibility and intelligence. And that means, I think, that we're going to need to direct a lot more resources towards those agencies of state, DFAT in particular, that have to prosecute this strategy.
Appreciate your insights. Bryce, Wakefield, thank you very much for joining us on Breakfast.